So today I have a client with me. She's sourced her own psilocybin and she's asked me to engage in psychedelic therapy.
Psychedelic psychotherapy is the use of a psychedelic agent in conjunction with a psychotherapeutic modality, a practice, applied to anxiety, depression, what they call the affective disorders primarily.
There are generally three subgroups of psychedelic psychotherapy. The first group, academics and people that are quite esteemed in the industry. The second group of people are people like myself who are various kinds of practitioners in the field. The third group is the DIY group, people that stumble across these substances or read about it and decide to see where it takes them.
You can have true hallucinations, perceiving things that don't exist.
Some have used these drugs to journey into the uncharted tunnels of the mind in search of medical and scientific truth.
It's quite a well-established approach. It's conducted in a comfortable space because what they call the set and the setting are very important for positive outcomes. Normally the participant would be given a set of eye shades so that they don't always have strong visual stimuli, and then they would often be given a set of headphones for music. It dates back to the 50s and the 1960s. Since the war on drugs commenced, the first to sort of spark this psychedelic renaissance was the use of MDMA, assisted psychotherapy for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that took place in the US. And then it's really moved on from there.
Okay, you ready to take your first capsule?
Sure.
When you were describing your experience as bizarre today,
I don't know, just the sensations in the body.
in the body,
Very difficult to describe, so bizarre seemed to fit.
So the current state of research in Australia is pretty much not very much at the moment. We have been taking steps to initiate research, so we've been trying to identify clinicians and researchers who may be prepared to get involved in this research. But at this stage, or to this point, there's been relatively little in the way of positive response. While there's a delay, any kind of delay in the research and then ultimately the implementation of psychedelic psychotherapy as a legitimate practice, then people who really do need these treatments have no other choice than to go underground if they're prepared to take the risks.
Even though you're going to be, under the influence of psilocybin, you're going to have quite a lot of control. And you've got a choice whether to move forward with the surrender, move forward with the emotions that are coming up, or you have a choice to also pull back. That being said, you've also got a lot of capabilities to stand up, walk around, ground yourself, and also come back into the breathing work and all of that kind of stuff just to bring you back down again. I'm a practicing psychotherapist, so I have a normal practice that I run on a day-to-day basis. Occasionally with clients that aren't able to get the resolution that they want out of their therapeutic work, I run psychedelic therapy as well. Therapy with the aid of various substances, MDMA, LSD and psilocybin.
Coming from some emotional abuse in the past and definitely a lot of trauma that's come with that, and I think a lot of fear in terms of self-esteem stuff and just a lot of shame and pain that I can feel is kind of holding me back in my life and in relationships going forward.
The issues with it lie obviously the legality of it, and that people are often so scared to seek it out. The mental health system in Australia and in other Western countries is so focused on management of mental issues rather than actually healing them. As a person goes through the mental health system, they need it more and more rather than less and less. So moving forward from here, just whenever you're ready to ingest the psilocybin, some of the biggest discomforts under these kind of settings is the fighting that we do to stop the natural things from coming out. So if you can surrender into that process, it'll be the most beneficial thing for you. Up here is specifically for me to bring up clients who wanted to do this kind of work. With my sessions, I like to do it for basically a 3-day thing. Say if we do it on the weekend, they would arrive on the Friday night. We'd have a nice relaxing dinner together, talk about any fears and worries that they have. Saturday morning, they'd have a light breakfast, do whatever they need to do in order to get comfortable, have the session. Then after the session, to walk around, enjoy the area and to really integrate the experience, and then be out by Sunday afternoon. So 2.5, 3 days. It's focused on a particular trauma or emotion or something that the client needs to resolve, work through them and release them in a coherent way. The constraints of this kind of operation is that I can't have any involvement with source in the substances or with advisors in the substances or anything like that. I can provide very general information on what kind of substances help in which kind of way, but it's ultimately about them finding what they want and hoping that it's a good positive chemical to work with. There are generally 3 subgroups of psychedelic psychotherapy. The first group, academics and people that are quite esteemed in the industry. The second group of people are people like myself who are various kinds of practitioners in the field. The third group is the DIY group, people that stumble across these substances or read about it and decide to see where it takes them. It's definitely a starting step. The issue is the dosages aren't approximated, the quality of the drugs aren't determined correctly in a setting that isn't necessarily appropriate, and have an experience that further throws a trauma into the negative direction. These are concerns.
Today I am going to be using LSD to attempt to manage my mental health. When I was 18, I was diagnosed with type 1 bipolar disorder. I'd just come off my psych meds for the first time, and I met someone who introduced me to psychedelics in a way that I'd never experienced them before, and I noticed that my mental health improved drastically. Being on the traditional medications, I've found to be really, really horrible. They just don't go well with my body. But being able to turn to psychedelics, it's allowed me to stabilize my mental health in a comfortable way, and it's brought about so many positive changes in my life. Like, there'll be times where I can't get out of bed, I can't clean my house, I can't communicate with any of my friends, and then I'll use psychedelics and I'll find myself painting and writing, and I want to go outside and I want to see nature and I want to go for walks. If the trials for psychotherapy became legalised, that's something that I would definitely be interested in taking part in.
Do you want to be a bat?
Today I'm going to be having a trip sitter with me, which is sort of the first time where I've actively sought out someone to sit with me.
My role is to trip sit, or I like to call co-pilot, and that is just holding space and creating a safe and non-judgmental space for someone who's tripping on psychedelics. The most useful things I've found online have been people's YouTube channels or YouTube videos of their own personal and lived experiences. The MAPS ones are really helpful as well.
Even though most psychedelic difficulties are psychological, not physical, if someone has taken a psychedelic drug and is having a difficult experience, a helper should first assess, is the person concerned about his or her physical safety?
During the session today, I will be staying sober, making sure that the person who's tripping feels as comfortable as possible, helping them with, I don't know, food, water, whatever they feel like they need to have the best experience.
I don't really see the trip sitter as sort of having a role that's comparable to a therapist. To me, a therapist is someone who actively prompts different pathways in the brain and, gives advice on, various therapy techniques. Whereas with having the trip sitter, it's very much about you working through those boundaries whilst having the insurance of safety. I'm taking a standard dose. I'll be taking initially 125 micrograms of LSD, and then after I settle into that, I'll potentially be taking another half of a tab.
The universities themselves are publicly funded and they're very risk averse in terms of rocking the boat, I guess, or potentially risking their public funding. Basically, it's a matter of funding, getting the researchers on board, and then finding facilities to conduct this research.
It needs to be a modality that is included in all textbooks, in all practices, in all schools, as both an alternative and a final therapeutic option for clients that are critical, for clients that are suffering, for clients that cannot find alleviation from their pain.
In a year's time, we would like to be making contact with some researchers in conjunction with some funding partners, be able to initiate one of these clinical trials or a number of these clinical trials in Australia. There's nobody saying that these treatments are going to be effective for everybody, and certainly there are plenty of very effective treatments for some of the people suffering these disorders already, but really very much part of the medical response to some of these otherwise quite intractable problems.